so excited to have this conversation with you. I know when we were doing our exploration call around your courageous decision, you identified one, possibly more, that are just very powerful. And so today is just here to talk about a decision that you were made, a courageous decision that you were forced to deal with or grapple with. And I just want to give the floor to you. Why don't you give us some context about maybe a little bit where you're at right now and a little bit about that the context for that courageous decision, please.
Sure, Ruben. Thanks for having this very interesting conversation. Great time to kind of introspect in the past. I think from a career perspective, one of those courageous decisions that have kind of stuck with me for pretty much quite some time has been when I was responsible for driving the migration of the SaaS customers from one of the acquired companies into a parent company. And this was a migration where actually the acquisition of the SaaS company was one of the early acquisitions that the parent company did, and their operating model was not quite SaaS ready. So when I think about a situation where we have these large set of customers, we had almost triple-digit customers which are running on as part of the SaaS business, and they had to be moved over to this parent company. And the team did a phenomenal job in getting some of the pre-sales and the booking processes ready so that the customers would have that good experience on the pre-sales up to the booking part. But as we start to look at the post-sales part of the customer experience lifecycle, that's where we figured that the end-to-end processes were not ready for the migration.
Okay.
And as you know, right, in a subscription business, it's really that post-sales element which is so critical. And so there was that point in time when we had to make that decision, which was a no-go decision on should we move this business over, should we move the customers over or not. And I was responsible for really making the recommendation for that go-no-go for the senior execs to take that call.
So there's a lot of pressure, right? I mean, if I can just jump in, because I love this conversation. So your company bought a SaaS business. I bet there's some enthusiasm around that. Was the company excited about the purchase?
Absolutely. It was a little bit early in time, but you can imagine with the boom in the subscription economy and the power that subscription businesses bring to the recurring revenue models, it was absolutely the right thing for the company to do, and they were very excited. Many of the senior executives, they in their mind were like, "Go! We have to move forward. We have to put the customers on."
Right.
And they were all charged and moving ahead.
So they'd spent quite a bit of money. They made a big investment, a big capital investment, right? And whenever you do an acquisition, there's some pain involved, right? You got to integrate teams, integrate people. Maybe even have some hard conversations about who stays and who goes and who takes on new. There's a lot of moving pieces to this. So you're excited about the acquisition. Did you see the business case as well? Did you agree with senior leadership that this was the right business case? Like this was a good move for the company?
Just to be clear, when I came in and I joined that business group, in fact, the company overall, this was post-acquisition.
Yes. Okay.
So so I was more at a phase where it was reconciled that the SaaS company had been bought. It was a great move. Everybody, we were all, both the sides were very excited, and now is the time to kind of really unite them into one company.
And to drive the promised revenue growth and the promised, the promises of this acquisition. But just because I know this is going to play a role, but did you agree with the acquisition? In your mind, was this a smart move?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And this was very important because, like I said, right, the move to recurring revenue was very important for the parent company. They were, it was more of recognized to be a hardware company, and, it was important to move towards software and recurring revenue. And this was like a crown jewel. The acquired company was a crown jewel when we talk about recurring revenue. So no doubt in my mind about the rationale behind the acquisition and a complete justification of the business case.
So now this is interesting. I love, we're building some drama now, right? Because the CEO is looking at this, the executive team is looking at this, and then your leader or your boss comes to you and says, "Pooja, give me a recommendation," right? Is that how did that work? How did you get roped into the actual? You were shaping up to this go no go pinnacle, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So even before the go no go, the reason I was brought into the business unit and my boss at that time, he hired me to drive the migration of the users from the acquired company into the parent company, right? That was the charter. I knew what I was signing up for when I stepped into that role. Now, of course, it was, in fact, the name of the project was also called as SaaS Acceleration. So you can imagine the amount of pressure that was building when this kind of project gets created. Yes. But we spent about a year and a half, 2 years working through the processes, working through the operating model, figuring out what our install base of customers were, which ones we could, kind of let alone and leave them in the existing environment. We don't need to move those very, very long-tail customers. We had done all that customer segmentation, that data analysis. And now was a point where, okay, we had to really start the actual movement, right? The customers had to move to that new environment. And that was the time of that go-no-go decision, which we all were kind of getting towards. So that was a key event.
But you're coming in, I love this. You're coming in with a crystal clear mission. You know exactly what you're here to do. You agree with the mission. You feel tasked and ready to go. You feel supported. Everything's lining up for this migration to take place. When did you get a feeling? When did you start that little small voice, or maybe it was a big voice, I don't know, but you start getting those, when did that take place?
Yeah, that's right. So as you can imagine, there are these multiple teams as part of a cross-functional effort. And in such kind of initiatives, it's all about communication, staying close to the teams, being very close to the nerve of how the teams are performing, how they are feeling. So in one of my conversations, and this was actually a colleague I had a very strong working relationship with, and when the lead there mentioned to me that the post-sales part of the customer experience lifecycle, primarily customer success and renewals motion, it just doesn't, there isn't really any meat on the bone on the parent company side. And you can imagine we had several conversations and I felt like, we could move the ball forward. We could still get something done by the time we have to make the decision. But in this one conversation, I vividly remember where she clearly said that, Pooja, this is not going to happen. So she was like, very clearly, she's telling me, there is no way we're going to move the customers. And I was like, okay, so now, what does that mean to the overall decision? And we started digging deeper into the whys. We started understanding what does it mean if we don't move the customers? And coincidentally, just that I had taken on this role, I was also sponsored for a course at Stanford, which was called as Strategic Decision Making and Risk Management. And it was time to now kind of pay back what I had learned in that course. And, there were two important things that I remember from the course. The first one was, in any such decisions, in any case which involve these, kind of mitigating the risks, we have to outweigh the risks and the benefits, right? We could clearly measure that. And there were tools that were given to us. There's a decision tree analysis, probabilistic analysis, all these different tools were taught to us. And so I remember going through a decision tree analysis with this team on what happens if we don't move the customers, right? And it was clear that the benefits of retaining those customers on the existing acquired business was completely outweighing the risk of moving these customers over and seeing a high churn for a pretty healthy business. So it was known to, right? Yeah. And then the second important learning from that course was, before you make a decision, you really develop your contingency plan. And so in this case, we said, okay, if we decide not to move forward, which means we will have to retain the customers on the tech stack for the acquired company, which means we have to extend the contract of the entire tech stack on the acquired company side. And we figured out a way to do that, and we figured out to extend the contract, the end of life contract, for about 3 to 4 years, because it really was going to be that long before the actual move would happen.
I love this. So a member of your team comes to you and says, hey, look, brass tacks here, we cannot hit this deadline. Mm-hmm. Did that catch you by surprise? Did it trigger a little bit of anxiety? What do I tell senior leadership? What was the human side of hearing that? Because I support my teammate. And then I also want to dig into, wow, you went to Stanford, you got a whole bunch of great, I wouldn't call it theory, but knowledge. And now you're trying to translate that into the real world. So let's start with your teammate tells you this. What's going through your mind as a leader? What are you thinking in that moment?
Yeah. So the first thing was that, it's really that intersection of what I felt consciously inside my gut, and the intersection of that with fear, right? So I had the gut feeling that it's right. The customer success renewals motion is not ready for us to move the customers. That was my gut sense. So I had that conscience that what I was hearing was correct. But there was also the fear of what if, because think about it, many of the senior executives in the parent company were expecting this to be a go.
Right.
And somewhere, if we were not making that decision, it would not only lead to disappointment. I mean, let's be honest. It might affect my slow down my career progression in the company in some ways.
Right.
So
that's honest. That's honest.
Right. Because I mean, no one wants to hear the bad news, right? And so those were the things that started to go on in my mind, and that was my early reaction. Of course, with time, over the years, in my career, I think we all do. We tend to mature a little bit. We're able to handle stress better. So that now I was like taking the time to talk to more and more people, dig into the data. I gave the team and myself time to do that. So that was the next step we took.
And so now you're getting yourself ready to go back to senior leadership, because I love where you're coming up. You're coming up against this wall of expectation. I mean, it's always hard, any relationship in life. There's an expectation that's set, lots of excitement built around it. And you have to adjust that expectation, to put it politely, right? So you went back to your team. You guys did your research. You really thought through it. Were you thinking about needing to give your senior leadership a when? Look, this is not what you want to hear, but this is when I think it would happen. What were you thinking in terms of what you're taking into the meeting with your senior leaders?
Yeah. So like I said, right, the first thing had to be why we are not ready. And the second is going to be, like you said, the when. Now, for why we had done our decision tree analysis, we had the reasons of, the why this decision is being made, the way it's being made. And then on the when side, we took a look at just realistically, even on, and I remember we did a bit of a benchmarking study with Salesforce on, what it really takes to build an end-to-end system. And this was the leader, she was a leader in sales at Salesforce, who was actually great. She's now one of the leaders in the revenue operations side, and she gave us a very realistic picture of what you could expect. And so, using that intelligence, we kind of painted a picture saying, it's going to be at least 3 to 4 years before this is going to happen, right? And and now the mitigation plan was, we're not letting our customers just sit there on an old tech stack. We will extend the date for the entire tech stack. We will make sure that we have the full support of the tech stack for the customers to be able to, so we can nurture the customers in the existing environment. So that was the mitigation plan that was put in place before the decision was communicated to our senior leaders. Now, what you got to remember is, there was good support from the leaders of the acquired company on this decision.
Yes.
The expectation mismatch was with the leaders on the parent company side.
Right.
Right. So that's where that was the expectation that had to be reset. But because I had the support of the leaders of the acquired company, it was a little easier.
So you had gone to your core constituents and gotten buy-in and support. There was no division there. How did you deliver the message? Was it an email? Was it a conversation? Was it email? What was the? How did you take that shot across the bow?
It was all face-to-face conversations. Sometimes it was like 2-1 meetings. Like my boss and I would go, or in other cases, it was 1-on-1 when it was just another senior colleague I was talking to. So we had to have multiple of these conversations before, of course, entering into that big go-no-go meetings. These big meetings where you have to really say approve, not approve, go no, no pressure, but they always are there.
So you've been dripping it. You've been building an alliance with your boss as well on this, and making sure your boss fully understood what's happening. Okay, so you go into that the morning of the big meeting, if there was one big meeting, or the morning of the several big meetings. What was going on with you? Were you feeling some weight on your shoulders? What was?
Yeah, by that time, I think the dust had settled. Everybody knew what was the decision going to be going into that meeting. So there was less anxiety for that meeting itself.
Okay.
Because the pre-meetings, the pre-discussions, I think we had all sorted out.
So you do this. What was the feedback? What was your expected feedback, or what were you thinking could happen, and what was the actual feedback from senior leadership of the parent company? How did that play itself out?
Yeah, I mean, listen, no doubt about the fact that they were disappointed. They were like, and actually some of the folks on the parent company side, because the booking process, the pre-sales process was ready, they were pushing hard to move forward.
Yeah.
And, that was a pushback that I had to overcome. And it's not easy. I think at the end of the day, it was just being true to my core value. And at that point, I knew that the right thing to do for the customers was to keep them on the existing acquired company stack, just because we cannot move them to a half-baked environment. So keeping the customer experience, which has always been an important driver for me, keeping that as a topmost driver for what I was responsible for, I did make that recommendation. I stood by that. And in fact, if you think back on where you started asking the question, which is, what goes into making a courageous decision? And I truly believe that at any such point in time, your conscious, your fears and your actions have to be united.
Yeah.
And this one, I think for all three of them were in harmony when I ultimately made the recommendation. And I think till date, I sleep well when I think about this particular decision that I made, even though I would say there was disappointment on the other side. My career probably slowed down a little bit. So all those things happened, but I still feel satisfied about the decision that was made.
I love where you're going with that, because I believe in the same thing, which is you have to be able to look yourself in the mirror at the end of the day, right? You have to be able to sleep well at night. And it sounds like you met those criteria, right? And so I love that. What was the outcome in the sense that, okay, maybe initial disappointment. Did you get any outcomes that, let's say, 3 to 6 months later? Was there any other outcome?
So this one was, like I said, the initiative was called as SaaS acceleration. So the first thing was, we kind of dismantled this initiative. There is nothing like SaaS acceleration that's happening. We all got to realize that this is going to take time. And we took the time to plan this thing, kind of replan this, going back to the drawing board, do it properly. And no good deed goes waste. And so about 3 to 4 years later, the parent company actually decided to set up a larger transformation initiative to drive recurring revenue, and I had the opportunity to lead that. And it was that opportunity where I was now able to bring back all the learnings from this past experience and do things right, not just for this one acquired business, but for the larger subscription business for the company.
I love that. Yeah.
It was a good, I guess, sense of completion.
I love that. And it's interesting because your company didn't get immediate gratification. You might not have gotten immediate gratification, especially with regards to where's my career heading and how does this affect me. But you did the right thing. You enrolled the right people, and you did right by your customers, right? Ultimately, you did right by your customers, right? And it ended up having a good outcome for the company, for you, and I guess I'll leave it at that. I mean, it sounds like it must have been, I can only imagine it must have been pretty gratifying. It may take a while to get there, but it must have been pretty gratifying to see how the ending of the story shaped up.
Absolutely. And I think it was ultimately beneficial for our stakeholders, our customers. Wall Street rewarded this company for kind of, the growth in recurring revenue that they saw. And stock grew very well. I think it was a 185% increase in stock over about 4 or 5 years, tremendous increase. So overall, absolutely gratifying in spite of all the hiccups and the frustrations and the difficult moments. But looking back, it feels, at least I get a good night's sleep, and I'm sure many others who are part of this team would also agree with that.
Well, there's no saying that. A couple of final questions for you. Knowledge is cheap. Wisdom, you got to pay a price for, right? And so, it's not like, right? Knowledge is cheap. You can go Google anything you want. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but wisdom, you pay a price for, right? And so, as you as a leader, how did it develop you and your trusting your intuition, trusting your leadership style? And then 2, what advice would you give to someone else who find themselves at a similar crossroads?
Sure. So in terms of developing my leadership skills, I think it just made me a bit more fearless about doing the right thing, sticking by the right thing. Not that in the past I would fear as much, but there's certainly there's always this question about second guessing yourself, or wanting to say, what if this doesn't turn out to be the way I'm thinking? But I think this one decision, having seen the full life cycle of the decision impact, and then 3 to 4 years later seeing how things panned out, I think it just gives me a lot more, like you said, not only the gratitude, but also the ability to take more such decisions in the future, both on the personal side as well as business side, for sure. And in terms of advice to others who are in a similar boat, I would say that whenever we are faced with such situations, there are always these 1 or 2 aha moments, not even, or really kind of those elements of truth that we have to find in this entire decision-making process, which you can always fall back upon. You can sort through the noise. There's going to be so much data, so much input, but there will be these 1 or 2 elements which you can always fall back upon to revalidate your decision whenever you think about it in the future. So always look for those key moments of truth or sources of truth which align to your conscious. And I have seen, even if I remember the entire process today, it's always going to be, I did the right thing for the customer. The customer churn rate and renewal rate would have, the churn rate would have been very high, renewal rate would have tanked if we would have moved the customers to their parent company. And I think that stays true even today when I reflect back on, okay, why did I not say a go? It was because of this reason. So look for that element, because that's going to stay with you, and that's going to be the truth that will stay over time.